2 girls missing for 4 years. Found when a mountain woman's dog entered a hidden cave. For 4 years, everyone said the Doyle sisters were gone. Lost. Another cold case buried under paperwork and winter. But when rescuers finally found the girls deep beneath Sawtooth Ridge, starving and shaking, the first thing Lila whispered wasn't fear. She whispered a name. Not Harper's, not the FBI's. She whispered, "The dog came back for us, even before they knew the truth, before anyone believed the mountain was hiding something alive. Ruger already did, and that single bark he gave on a forgotten morning was the sound that unraveled an entire lie. The kind of lie built to stay buried forever. The mountains were supposed to be quiet that morning, the kind of quiet that settled into the bones and made a person believe the world wasn't as cruel as it once had been. But Harper Caldwell had lived up here long enough to know silence could lie. Ruger heard it first. One moment he was trotting ahead of her on the ridge trail, his breath rising like smoke in the cold air, his body loose and confident. The next he froze. Every muscle locked, ears pointed, tail straight. Harper stopped mid-step. The thermos in her hand jolted, spilling coffee across her flannel sleeve. She didn't curse. She only watched him, the way a person watches a storm forming out of nowhere. Easy, boy. But Ruger didn't even flick an ear. He wasn't afraid. He was warning. Then he growled, a deep rolling sound from somewhere inside his chest. Harper felt it before she heard it. "What is it?" she whispered. Ruger didn't answer. He launched. By the time Harper caught her breath, he was already slicing through the fog, a streak of brindle fur disappearing toward the limestone ridge behind her cabin. Harper sprinted after him, lungs burning, boots slipping on the frost-hardened ground. "Ruger." Her voice cracked, swallowed by the mist. When she reached him, he was standing at full attention beside an outcrop of old limestone that didn't belong there. At least she had lived in these mountains long enough to know when something didn't look natural. Moss covered most of the slab, and wind-tangled brush wrapped the edges, but Ruger wasn't interested in any of that. His nose was fixed on a single point beneath the rock, his breath coming fast and sharp. Harper pushed past the branches, letting the thorns scratch her forearms. She dropped to her knees beside Ruger. "What do you smell?" He gave a low bark. One short, one breath, and another. His code. Object found. Harper leaned in, brushing back a clump of dead pine needles. Something pale caught the early light. A piece of fabric, no bigger than her palm. She pulled it gently from beneath the stone. The sound it made coming free was wrong. Too clean, too cared for. It was a child's handkerchief, embroidered with a tiny blue fawn stitched into one corner. A pattern she had seen once, 4 years ago, on a flyer stapled to every gas station pole from Boise to the edge of this mountain. The Doyle sisters, Lila and Minnie, ages 9 and 7, their denim jackets, their matching embroidered handkerchiefs their grandmother made, their mother standing in front of a crowd begging for someone to bring them home. Harper had moved up here long before their case went cold, but not so long she'd forgotten the way their father looked in that final press conference. Hollowed, silent. No one ever found a trace of them. Until now. Harper brought the fabric to her nose. She expected dirt, mold, forest rot. Instead, she smelled something antiseptic. Too sterile for the wilderness. Someone took care of this. Ruger's growl deepened. He pawed the ground once, sharp and insistent. Harper saw it then, right beside the slab, barely visible under the crust of frost. A smear in the dirt. A little handprint, small enough to be a child's, recent enough that wind or rain hadn't erased it. Her stomach tightened. No. After 4 years, that was impossible. But Ruger stepped forward and pressed his nose into the ground again. His body thrummed with conviction. Harper had trusted him before, back when he worked search and rescue, and she was still learning how to live with grief instead of being smothered by it. Ruger didn't alert without reason. He didn't chase ghosts. Harper rose slowly, scanning the tree line. The fog had begun to thin, revealing the dark sweep of the Sawtooth Mountains stretching endlessly behind her cabin. The air suddenly felt too still, too expectant. She whispered the girls' names without meaning to. Lila, Minnie. The mountains gave nothing back. Harper's pulse kicked as she remembered the sheriff's final words years ago. They didn't survive out here. Nothing could. Case closed. But the clean embroidery in her hand said otherwise. So did Ruger. He nudged her elbow, harder than he needed to, eyes bright and steady. Then he looked at the limestone slab again, ears pinned forward. There was more. She could feel it. Harper reached into her jacket for her phone, but she didn't dial the sheriff. Instead, she tapped the encrypted satellite link she hadn't used in 2 years. Only one person would understand this. Only one person she still trusted. Nia, she said when the connection clicked. I need you. Where? My ridge. Bring your pack. Bring the quiet version of yourself. Nia didn't ask why. Harper lowered the phone, breath heavy in the cold, and looked again at the handkerchief. 4 years, 4 winters, 4 seasons of silent mountains. And now this. Clean. Tended. Left where Ruger would find it. The truth wasn't buried. It was hidden. Ruger stood beside her, shoulders squared, as if he'd been waiting for this moment longer than she had. She brushed his fur, her voice barely a whisper. You found something the rest of us missed. Ruger didn't move. He didn't have to. The air around them had changed. And Harper knew, deep in the place, grief had hollowed. Years ago, that whatever lived behind this slab wasn't just a memory. It was still breathing, and it wanted to be found. By the time Harper reached the sheriff's office in town, the morning sun had clawed through the clouds, throwing pale light across the brick building. It should have felt warm. It didn't. Ruger paced beside her truck, restless, nose flicking toward the woods as if he hated being this far from the ridge. Harper stepped inside, clutching the evidence bag with the embroidered handkerchief sealed inside. Sheriff Brackett looked up from his desk, surprise flashing across his worn face. Harper Caldwell. Thought you swore off town visits. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't serious. She placed the evidence bag on his desk. He barely glanced at it before leaning back in his chair. What am I looking at? A handkerchief? Harper replied. One that belongs to Lila Doyle. He stared at her blankly. She swallowed. The missing girls. 4 years ago. Sheriff Brackett sighed, long and tired. Harper, we combed that mountain in more ways than you can count. We had state troopers, federal agents, volunteer teams. Those girls didn't survive out there. You never searched that ridge. Because nothing lives on that ridge. He shot back. Nothing stable. No shelter. No food source. You know that. Ruger found it. Harper said quietly. Brackett stared at the bag again, unimpressed. A piece of fabric doesn't reopen a cold case. It's not just fabric, she said. Smell it. He recoiled. I'm not sniffing lost and found. Harper didn't blink. Then trust me. It smells like antiseptic. A human tried to keep it clean. Brackett rubbed a hand over his jaw. You've been up there alone too long. Silence can make people imagine things. Ruger's bark split the room. Deep, sharp, and commanding. Brackett jumped back a step. Easy, boy. Harper placed a hand on Ruger's collar. She looked at the sheriff again. He's alerting on the fabric. He doesn't do that unless he's confused, Brackett said, cutting her off. Or you're reading too much into an old trauma. The words hit harder than she expected. Trauma. As if everything she'd survived was some messy story she should have moved past by now. She straightened. I'm not confused, and neither is he. Brackett hesitated, but finally shook his head. I'll send a deputy up to take a look tomorrow. But I'm not reopening anything. Not until you bring me something real. Blood. Prints. A living witness. Something that isn't just hope disguised as evidence. Harper grabbed the bag from his desk, jaw clenched. You're going to regret saying that. Outside, the wind cut colder than before. Ruger hopped into the truck but didn't settle. He stared toward the mountains, ears rigid, body tense. Harper opened the door and leaned against the frame. What did you find that he refuses to believe? Ruger pressed his nose into her palm. His breath was warm, but his body trembled with the kind of focus she had only seen in him during disaster deployments years ago. All right, she said. Show me. She drove straight back to the ridge. The road was quiet, but the woods weren't. Birds scattered before the truck even turned off the engine. Something had moved through here since sunrise, something that had weight. Ruger leaped out before she could grab the leash, bolting toward the limestone slab. Harper ran after him, boots slipping on thin patches of old snow. The slab looked the same. But Ruger was different. He moved in a widening spiral, nose working the air in quick, sharp huffs. Then he stopped, completely still. His tail lifted, his breath slowed. Every fiber of him was locked onto something she couldn't see. Harper walked carefully toward him. What is it now, boy? Ruger exhaled suddenly, almost like an animal sigh of recognition, and nudged the base of the rock again. Harper crouched, brushing aside a new layer of debris the wind had blown over. Something glinted faintly. She lifted it, a strip of gauze, clean except for one corner, a smear of ointment, the same sterile smell as the handkerchief. Fresh. Her pulse kicked. She checked the edges. No dirt embedded, no mold. It hadn't been here long. Hours, maybe. Ruger whined low, almost mournful. Then he pressed his ear to the slab, as if listening to something beneath it. Harper knelt beside him. Are you hearing something? Ruger backed away, then pressed forward again, pacing a line she didn't understand until she looked closer. Tracks, tiny, barefoot, a child. The prints disappeared into the shadowed brush, too light for snow to hold, too hasty to be deliberate. Someone is coming back here, she murmured, or someone is trying to get out. The thought hollowed her chest. She stood abruptly and pulled out her satellite phone. Nia answered on the second ring. Caldwell. Tell me you didn't call because Ruger found a dead elk again. He found something worse. Harper replied. Nia's tone shifted instantly. Tell me everything. Harper did. Quickly, directly. The handkerchief, the gauze, the barefoot tracks. Ruger's alerts. And the part she didn't say out loud, but Nia heard anyway. You think one of the girls is alive? Nia said. I think someone is keeping them alive. Or trying to. There was a long breath on the other end. I can be at your place by nightfall. Bring Ruger somewhere safe. And Harper. What? If what you're saying is real, this isn't a coincidence. Someone left that out for him on purpose. Harper stiffened. For Ruger? Yes. But why? Nia hesitated before saying the words Harper hadn't let herself think. Because whoever is behind this knows he's the only one who could find them. Harper felt the weight of that drop through her like a stone. Not fear, not disbelief. Something older. Something she thought she'd buried with her son. Purpose. Ruger nudged her knee gently, eyes steady on hers, the way he used to in those first months after the accident when she could barely get out of bed. All right, she whispered. We're not letting this mountain swallow any more children. Ruger barked once, Sharp, certain, as if he'd been waiting 4 years to hear her say it. Snowfall had softened overnight, leaving a thin crust on the forest floor that cracked under Harper's boots as she and Ruger climbed back toward the ridge. The cold bit sharper this morning, the kind that stung the lungs and made sound travel further than it should. Ruger didn't seem bothered. His body hummed with purpose, nose low, tail stiff, every step deliberate. Harper felt it too, the gnawing sense that something about yesterday wasn't finished. The limestone slab came into view through the pines. The fog had lifted, but the air still held that strange pressure she'd felt the first time Ruger alerted her. The mountain was waiting. Ruger trotted ahead, circling the slab once before locking onto a point near its base. He dropped his nose and inhaled deeply, then glanced up at Harper with an expression she recognized instantly. He'd found something new. Harper crouched beside him. "What did you get?" Ruger pawed the rock sharply. Harper leaned closer. A faint set of marks ran along the lower edge, almost invisible against the stone. She traced them with her glove, and her breath caught. They weren't animal scratches. The shape was wrong, the depth too shallow. These were nail marks, human, a child's. Her stomach tightened. She brushed aside more snow and uncovered several more gouges, small and frantic, the kind someone made when they were desperate for a way out. Ruger pressed his head against her shoulder, steady and grounding, as if he sensed the ripple that passed through her. She whispered, "Someone was trying to claw their way free." Ruger moved again, circling the slab once more before veering off toward a patch of disturbed snow. Harper followed, heart thudding as he nudged aside a layer of frost with his snout. Something thin and metallic glinted underneath. She knelt, brushed away the slush, and lifted it into her palm. A hair clip, plastic, blue, a small crack on one side. And warm, not sun-warmed, body-warmed. Someone had dropped it minutes or hours before, someone alive. Harper felt the world tilt slightly. She held the clip tighter. Ruger's nose brushed it once, confirming what she already feared and hoped in equal measure. This belongs to a child. She stood abruptly and turned towards the trail. Nia would be here soon. Harper had called her again at dawn, voice steady except for the one moment it broke. Nia had cut her off mid-sentence. "Say no more. I'm coming." Harper stepped back from the rock, scanning the surrounding trees with a renewed urgency. Tracks marred the snow near the brush line, not clear enough to photograph, but clear enough to recognize a boot tread smaller than any adult's. Fresh, too. The imprint edges were crisp, not softened by thaw. Harper knelt, touching it with her glove. Not the Doyle girls. They'd be teenagers by now. So who was here? Ruger gave a low, frustrated huff and jerked his head toward the slope above them. Harper followed the direction of his stare. A broken branch, snapped clean, fresh sap still gleaming. Someone was moving through these woods. The crunch of tires on ice snapped the silence. Harper turned as a dark SUV crested the rise. The door opened before the engine had fully died. Nia Torres climbed out, backpack slung over one shoulder, cold air turning her breath into steam. She looked the same as the last time Harper saw her. Sharp eyes, clipped hair, posture like she was still on deployment. But there was something harder now, a grief-born edge. She took one look at Harper, then at Ruger, and her expression changed. "Show me." Harper handed her the hair clip. Nia inhaled once and cursed under her breath. This is too new. Ruger circled them both, then returned to the slab, nose pressed to the marks. Nia crouched beside him, tracing the scratches with her fingers. These aren't old. Someone did this with raw hands. And recently. Harper swallowed, and the gauze was fresh too. Nia straightened slowly. Someone has been keeping those girls alive. Or someone else. Harper looked toward the tree line. Ruger's ears pricked, his body angled as if he expected movement at any moment. Naya followed his line of sight. Whoever was here, they're not far. Harper exhaled, breath trembling. Sheriff Brackett won't listen. He thinks I'm chasing ghosts. Nia huffed a short laugh. Then let me tell you something you already know. Ruger doesn't chase ghosts. Ruger barked once, sharp and certain, as if punctuating her words. Nia knelt beside him, resting a hand on his flank. He's tracking someone, and whoever it is, they're alive. You feel that, right? Harper nodded. Nia glanced at the hair clip again. You know what scares me more than the fact that someone's been here? What? Nia met her eyes. The fact that they didn't hide their trail well enough. It's like they wanted Ruger to find this. A cold prick raced down Harper's spine. Why would they want that? Nia didn't answer. She didn't have to. Ruger moved again, tail stiff, nose twisting toward the ridge, as if catching a thread of scent too faint for human senses. He whined low, a sound Harper had heard only a handful of times. Not fear, urgency. You think the girls are still alive? Harper whispered. Nia scanned the woods. I think someone kept them alive for 4 years, and I think they're watching us. Ruger snarled suddenly, a raw warning that echoed through the clearing. Harper spun. A rustle. Faint. Quick. Then gone. Nia's hand drifted to her coat, where Harper knew she kept a concealed sidearm even in civilian life. Harper stepped closer to Ruger, her voice low. What did you see, boy? He didn't look at her. He stared at the tree line, rigid and ready. Nia whispered, Someone was just here. Harper felt the truth of it in her bones. The mountain wasn't hiding its secrets anymore. They were moving, watching, breathing, and they wanted to be found. Ruger moved with a confidence Harper hadn't seen in years, his body slicing through the underbrush like he'd memorized every secret the forest had ever tried to hide. Harper kept pace behind him, with Nia scanning the tree line as they climbed into the higher ridge. The air changed the deeper they went, colder, sharper, carrying something metallic beneath the pine. Harper recognized that smell. It wasn't weather. It was infrastructure. Human presence. Ruger halted so abruptly that Harper nearly stumbled into him. His nose hovered inches above a patch of ferns pressed unnaturally flat. Nia crouched beside him. Track? She asked. Harper studied the flattened space. No paw prints, no hoof marks, a sweep. Something dragged or pushed through. Ruger sniffed along the ground again, following the crushed ferns until they disappeared, behind a thick curtain of spruce. Harper pushed the branches aside. Behind them was an opening she'd never noticed before, despite hiking this ridge for years. A narrow path cut into the earth, the sides lined with old wooden posts, rotten with age. A sign hung crooked off one of them, the lettering faded but still readable. Restricted access. U.S. Forestry Service. Closed 1998. Nia let out a low whistle. Harper, this hasn't been on any current map. Harper nodded slowly. And it shouldn't exist anymore. Ruger gave a small, urgency-filled bark before stepping into the path, his stride slow and methodical, nose working overtime. Harper and Nia followed, ducking under fallen branches and moving deeper into the corridor of forgotten forest. The farther they pushed, the more the past pressed in on Harper. Old memories stirred, ones she had buried so deep she'd convinced herself they belonged to someone else. Project Haven, a government-funded youth stabilization initiative, launched with bright promises and quiet warnings. Harper had worked there briefly, performing medical evaluations for rural at-risk children. No uniforms, no official badges, just counselors, behavioral doctors, and a handful of field personnel tasked with evaluating kids before placement. It was supposed to be humane, progressive, until it wasn't. Funding dried up. 2 supervisors resigned overnight. Files disappeared. And then one morning, Harper arrived at work to find the entire facility abandoned. Doors open, lights off. No closure, no explanation. She blinked hard, pushing the memory back. Ruger stiffened ahead. Nia whispered, "He's got something." Ruger's head turned into the wind, nostrils flaring. His tail rose, the signal he'd caught scent again. He trotted forward, then paused on a sloping bank where the ground appeared recently disturbed. Harper crouched, brushing aside the loose pine needles. Beneath them, the earth was churned, soft and uneven. A boot tread, but not the kind locals wore. The imprint was sharp-edged, heavy, tactical, fresh enough that soil still clung to the ridges. Nia shook her head. No hunter around here uses anything like that. These tracks are from a reinforced sole, law enforcement, or military. Harper felt an old chill creep up her spine. Project Haven's field officers once wore boots like these. Only the program had been dissolved almost 15 years ago, unless someone brought the gear with them. Ruger veered left suddenly, nose low, ears pointed at something just beyond a fallen pine. Harper followed and saw it. Tire marks, leading off the old trail, across a shallow patch of snow and vanishing into the trees. But these weren't from a wide tread truck like those driven by locals. The width was narrow, the depth light. A 4-wheel utility vehicle, the kind used by old government outposts or wilderness field stations. Nia knelt beside the tracks, her breath fogging. Someone drove this within the last 12 hours. Harper exhaled sharply. Sheriff Brackett hadn't sent anyone yet, which meant someone else had been here, someone who knew the access roads better than the locals, someone who needed to move quietly. Nia stood. Harper, this ridge wasn't closed because of landslide risk or environmental damage. It was closed because someone wanted this forest untouched, undisturbed. Ruger barked once, not loudly, just enough to snap both women's attention back to him. Harper stepped closer. "What is it, boy?" Ruger stared up the slope, muscles taut. Harper followed his gaze to a jagged outcrop halfway up the ridge. Most of it was concealed by brush, but she noticed something wrong. A piece of fabric snagged on the lower branch of a juniper. Off-white. Small. She reached it and tugged it free. It came loose easily. Too easily. It was another strip of gauze. Nia's jaw tightened. Same sterilizing scent as before? Harper nodded. Exactly the same. But something else clung to it. A faint warmth. Worn recently. Within hours. Nia exchanged a look with Harper that neither wanted to interpret out loud. "Someone is treating injuries out here," Nia whispered. "Someone with medical training. Or at least someone who knows basic wound care." Harper stared at the gauze, feeling her pulse thrum in her ears. Project Haven had once required staff to undergo emergency first aid certification. She had taught some of the classes. Ruger growled low, grounding her back in the present. His hackles rose, not in aggression, but as if confirming a truth. Harper swallowed hard. "You think this is connected to Haven?" Nia glanced at the old restricted sign behind them. "Don't you?" Harper didn't answer. She didn't need to. The forest had never felt so alive around them. The wind carried more than cold now. It carried movement, fear, residual human presence, as if the trees were holding their breath. Ruger jerked his head suddenly, pulling away from the slope and toward a dense line of brush to the east. He moved fast, not barking, just weaving forward with a focus that made Harper's skin prickle. "He's picking. Up a wind current," Nia said. "Something's ahead. Something alive." Harper felt the truth of that deep in her chest. She touched Ruger's collar. "Lead the way." He surged ahead, guiding them through tangled branches, down a narrow embankment, and toward a forgotten fire road that hadn't been used in decades. Except today, it had fresh indentations on both sides. Boot prints, light enough to be a child's, heavy enough to be an adult guarding them. Nia stared at the pattern. 2 sets, one small, one large. Harper felt her breath catch. Someone hasn't just been hiding here. They're moving through the forest. Recently. Ruger barked once, a sharp note that echoed off the trees. Harper met Nia's eyes. Someone is living out here. Nia nodded slowly. Or hiding in a place they're terrified to leave. The wind shifted. Ruger froze. Harper's heart hammered. What now, boy? Ruger looked over his shoulder at her, eyes locked with something urgent and almost human. Then he looked back at the forest and growled. The message was clear. They weren't alone in these woods. Not anymore. Ruger stopped so abruptly that Harper nearly collided with him. His nose hovered inches above a wall of tangled vines clinging to the base of a rock formation Harper had hiked past 100 times. Only today, something was different. The air was wrong here. Still stale, carrying an undercurrent of metal and old breath. Ruger pressed forward, paw lifting, scraping once against the vines before letting out a low growl that rattled in his chest. Not a warning. A command. Harper stepped beside him and brushed the vines aside. Beneath them was a narrow slit in the stone, just wide enough for a grown person to squeeze through if they angled their shoulders. The edges weren't natural. Someone had sliced the rock with tools years ago. Nia crouched on the other side of Ruger, flashlight already in hand. This was carved by human hands. Deep cuts. Someone built an entrance. Ruger pushed his nose toward the opening again, inhaling deeply, then looked back at Harper. His eyes hardened with a certainty she felt in her bones. He wants us to go in, Harper said. Then we go, Nia replied. The moment Harper ducked inside, the temperature dropped. The air tasted like rust and damp earth, laced with something faint and mechanical. As her eyes adjusted, she saw it. A metal pipe jutting from the wall, crudely installed and buzzing with quiet airflow. A ventilation system. Someone had engineered oxygen flow into this chamber. Nia muttered, "This isn't a cave. It's a shelter." Harper swept her flashlight across the small, open space. Ruger moved in tight circles, his nose brushing the ground, then the walls. He whined sharply at one corner. Harper followed him. A pile of fabric lay there, half buried in dust. She crouched and lifted it gently. A child's shirt, torn, faded, the collar stained brown, dried blood. Nia knelt beside her. That stain. It's months old, maybe more. But the cloth hasn't rotted. Harper whispered. Someone's been cleaning it, preserving it. The walls weren't smooth stone either. As Harper leaned in, she saw tiny scratches carved unevenly across the surface. She brushed the tips of her fingers across them, and her stomach dropped. Letters. Small, weakly formed, carved with fingernails or a piece of rock. Some repeated over and over. An A, then an R, AJ, and others that looked like children trying to remember their names in the dark. Nia shone her light higher. Harper. Look. One message, clearer than the rest, stretched across a flatter section of wall. We are still here. Harper felt her breath catch. Her hand went instinctively to Ruger's neck, grounding herself in his warm, steady presence. The dog pressed closer, leaning his weight against her leg. Someone lived down here? Nia whispered. For a long time. Harper swallowed. And someone kept them alive long enough to write that. Ruger suddenly stiffened. He spun toward the direction they'd come from and barked once, sharp, echoing violently inside the stone chamber. Footsteps. Soft. Above them. Moving away fast. Nia's head snapped up. Someone's out there. Harper bolted to the entrance, Ruger at her heels. She reached the opening just in time to see a shadow slip into the trees. Small, fast, barefoot. Too quick to be an adult. Too light to disturb much snow. A child. Alive. Harper stepped out, but Ruger blocked her, pressing into her with his full weight, holding her back. "He doesn't want you chasing," Nia said. "He thinks it's a trap." Harper felt the truth in every muscle of his body. She wasn't seeing ghosts. Someone was playing a deadly game of proximity, showing themselves, then disappearing before she could get close. Harper pulled in a slow breath and looked back toward the cave. The carved letters seemed to glow in the cold light. "We are still here." Heat built in her chest. Not anger, not fear, but something harder to swallow. She needed help. Real help. Someone who could move jurisdiction and force the state to care about a case everyone else had abandoned. She pulled out her satellite phone. The man who answered sounded younger than she expected. Eli Morgan, FBI Field Response. "Who is this?" Harper cleared her throat. "My name is Harper Caldwell. I found something under the Sawtooth Ridge, a sealed shelter, evidence of miners, possibly the Doyle sisters, and someone just fled the scene." Silence. Then Eli said, "I'm an hour away. Don't touch anything else." The line went dead. Nia raised a brow. "That was fast. Too fast," Harper replied. When Eli arrived, his SUV barely crested the ridge before he stepped out, windbreaker snapping, his expression controlled but too aware for someone unfamiliar with the area. Ruger stalked forward, tail stiff, and sniffed the agent's boots with pointed suspicion. Eli Morgan froze, watching the dog with more caution than most agents gave working K9s. "He's intelligent," Eli said. Not a question. A reading. Harper frowned. "You've worked with Dutch shepherds before." Eli didn't answer. Instead, he crouched beside the cave entrance and brushed the carved letters with his gloved fingertips. He whispered, "Someone sent this message recently." Nia eyed him. "You seem more prepared for this than someone responding to a cold call." Eli didn't look up. Project Haven was never properly shut down. Parts of it went rogue. Harper's blood chilled. "How do you know that?" Finally, he met her eyes. "Because I was assigned to investigate its closure 3 years ago. The files were sealed, access restricted, and someone warned me off." Ruger growled. Eli didn't break eye contact with Harper. "I think the children who wrote these letters weren't meant to be found. Not then. Maybe not now." Harper exhaled slowly, the truth settling on her like a weight she couldn't shake. "But Ruger found them," she said. Eli nodded once. "That dog may have just uncovered something the government buried a long time ago." Ruger barked again, sharp and urgent. Harper turned. Fresh footprints had appeared at the edge of the tree line, small, barefoot, leading deeper into the woods. Nia whispered, "They're still out there." Eli straightened, jaw set. "Then we go after them. Now." Harper looked down at Ruger. His muscles were coiled, ready, eyes blazing with a certainty she trusted more than any badge. "Lead us, boy." And Ruger launched forward, into the shadows, toward the truth the mountain had hidden for far too long. The forest thickened as the three of them followed Ruger's trail back toward the carved chamber. The snow had stopped, but the cold had grown sharper, slicing across Harper's cheeks and settling into her joints. Ruger's body moved with tense purpose, every muscle wound tight, every breath an alert. Eli stayed a few steps behind, scanning the ridge with the caution of someone who had already seen ghosts come back to life. Nia walked beside Harper, shoulders squared, jaw clenched. They reached the cave entrance where the ventilation pipe hummed faintly beneath the stone. Eli crouched beneath the vines again, tracing the carved words, We are still here with the back of his glove. This wasn't just a shelter, he murmured. It was part of the old structure. Haven had a reform camp built into these mountains back in the 90s. Facilities scattered under federal contracts. Most were abandoned. Some repurposed. Harper locked onto his tone. Some turned into what? Eli didn't answer. He just stood, brushing dirt from his knees. Whoever ran Haven didn't want oversight. When the probe started, files vanished, employees reassigned, whistleblowers transferred, and the rest of us received threats dressed up as memos. Nia's eyes narrowed. And you didn't think that was relevant to tell us the second you arrived? Before Eli could speak, Ruger stiffened. His ears shot forward, his tail lowered, his shoulders squared. Harper knew that stance. It was the posture he took seconds before charging into a collapsed building in Afghanistan. Something's wrong, she whispered. Ruger let out one short, sharp bark. Then he launched into the trees. Ruger! Harper ran forward, but he was already gone, swallowed by the darkness between the pines. Nia swore under her breath and sprinted after him. Harper followed, her boots sliding across the snow, heart hammering. Eli came last, calling into his radio that they had movement. Ruger's tracks cut a clean line across the frost, then dipped toward a second rock formation, one none of them had noticed before. A slab leaned at an odd angle, half covered in brush and deadfall. Ruger shot straight toward it and vanished behind the stone. Harper reached the slab and saw it, a narrow gap between rock and earth, deeper than the last one, and filled with cold air escaping in faint bursts. A second entrance. Nia breathed. They built an entire network. Harper didn't hesitate. She squeezed inside, scraping her shoulder along the jagged edge of the stone. Nia followed. Eli ducked in behind them, flashlight beam slicing through the pitch black. The tunnel sloped downward. It was colder here, older, untouched by wind or weather. Moisture collected on the walls in thin lines, and somewhere deeper in the dark, water dripped in a slow, steady rhythm. Then they heard it. A sound so soft Harper thought she imagined it at first. A whisper. Faint. Fragile. Help. Nia froze. Tell me that was a radio echo. Harper shook her head. That was human. Ruger barked again ahead of them, but now the sound was tighter, closer, bouncing off stone in uneven echoes. They rounded a bend, sliding on loose gravel. The light pooled forward and hit the shape of Ruger's body. He stood absolutely still, staring into a narrow chamber half collapsed on one side. Harper dropped to her knees beside him. Ruger, what is it? What do you smell? The dog didn't move. He only took one slow step forward and pressed his nose against a cluster of rocks lodged against the far wall. From behind the stones came a trembling, quivering whisper. Please. Harper's breath caught in her throat. Nia knelt beside her and pressed her ear to the rock. The voice came again, thinner, as if scraped through exhaustion. He said the dog would come back. Harper's vision blurred for a moment. She touched the stone. Cold, damp. But the voice behind it was warm with life, fragile but real. Nia shined her light across the collapsed area. The stones were stacked, not fallen. Someone had built a barrier. Eli swallowed hard. Someone sealed them in. On purpose. Ruger began pawing at the rocks, whining, his nails scraping frantically. Harper grabbed his collar gently. Easy, boy. We'll get them out. Behind the wall, the whisper returned, breaking in the middle like the air hurt to breathe. Is he still there? Eli stiffened. Who? Who are you talking about? A shaky answer came back, muffled. The man with the keys. He said the dog would come, back for us. Harper felt her veins turn to ice. Ruger's bark echoed once, bouncing off the enclosed stone. Eli turned slowly, flashlight trembling in his grip. Someone knew Ruger, knew his training, knew his patterns. Nia whispered what Harper was already thinking. This wasn't luck. Someone led him here years ago. The girl behind the stone whispered one more time. Please hurry. He said he hears the mountains. He said he'll know if you're coming. Harper stood, breath sharp, heartbeat pounding. She whispered to Ruger, Show us the way, boy. He barked once and pushed into the darkness again, deeper into the tunnel network. This time, Harper followed without hesitation, because the mountains weren't finished with them. And somewhere inside these caverns, someone who had been waiting 4 years was suddenly awake again. The tunnel narrowed into a jagged throat of stone, and Ruger pushed ahead with a confidence that only sharpened Harper's fear. The dog's body moved low, steady, controlled, but the tension in his spine told her everything. Someone was close, someone alive, someone scared. Harper's knees scraped rock as she crawled after him. Nia came behind, breath shallow, gun drawn but low. Eli brought up the rear, flashlight cutting sharp, surgical arcs through the dark. Ruger stopped abruptly. His entire frame went still. Harper froze behind him, pulse hammering. Then his tail flicked once. Not warning. Recognition. Harper whispered, Show me, boy. Ruger stepped forward, pushing his head into a narrow split in the wall. The beam of Harper's flashlight slipped past him and caught movement. Small. Human. Harper squinted. 2 faces stared back at her. Eyes wide, hollow, reflecting fear and something else, something older than their years. The older girl clutched the younger close, her thin arm wrapped protectively around a body so small Harper's chest tightened at the sight. The beam trembled in Harper's hand as she took them in. The older one spoke first. Her voice was rough from thirst, but steady. Are you real? Harper nodded slowly. My name is Harper. This is Nia. That's Ruger. He's the one who found you. At the sound of his name, Ruger lowered himself to the ground and inched forward, belly scraping stone, posture soft and gentle. He let out a low whine. The younger girl's lips parted. The dog from before. Nia glanced at Harper. Before. How long before? The older girl swallowed. Her hair was matted, her cheeks hollow, but she held herself like someone who'd learned to survive in silence. He came once, a long time ago. He barked at the man. Loud. The man hit him with something and he ran away. But he came back today. She touched Ruger's head with tentative fingers. Ruger leaned into her. Harper blinked back, the sting in her eyes. What are your names? The older girl hesitated, as if names were secrets they weren't sure they were allowed to give anymore. The older one spoke first. Her voice was rough from thirst, but steady. Are you real? Harper nodded slowly. My name is Harper. This is Nia. That's Ruger. He's the one who found you. At the sound of his name, Ruger lowered himself to the ground and inched forward, belly scraping stone, posture soft and gentle. He let out a low whine. The younger girl's lips parted. The dog from before. Nia glanced at Harper. Before, how long before? The older girl swallowed. Her hair was matted, her cheeks hollow, but she held herself like someone who'd learned to survive in silence. He came once, a long time ago. He barked at the man. The man hit him and he ran away. But he came back today. She touched Ruger's head with tentative fingers. Ruger leaned into her. Harper blinked back, the sting in her eyes. What are your names? The older girl hesitated, as if names were secrets they weren't sure they were allowed to give anymore. I'm Lila, she whispered. 13. She pushed her sister forward gently. This is Minnie, 11. Minnie shivered. Her voice was barely a thread. Is he gone, the man? Minnie shivered. Her voice was barely a thread. Is he gone? The man? Harper exchanged a glance with Nia. What man? The one who kept us here? Lila said. He said he used to work for a place called Haven. Project Haven. He told us no one would come. He said the world forgot. Eli inhaled sharply behind them. Harper didn't turn. She couldn't. Not yet. Lila continued, voice quavering now, the exhaustion finally cracking her calm. 2 days ago he packed a bag. Said he had to erase things, tracks, evidence. He said if anyone came it would be the dog. The same dog from before. The one who never gave up. Minnie clutched Ruger tighter, burying her face in his shoulder. He said the dog would bring people, and he said if they came, he'd be watching. A cold prickle ran up Harper's spine. Nia leaned closer. Watching from where, sweetheart? Lila shook her head. I don't know, but he has guns. A lot. He took one every time he left. And he knows all the tunnels. He knows when people move through them. Eli muttered under his breath. We're not alone down here. Harper forced her voice to stay steady. Lila, Minnie. Can you walk? Lila nodded. Minnie hesitated, then Ruger nudged her gently, and she pushed herself upright. Harper reached into her pack and pulled out 2 small mylar blankets. She wrapped them around the girls, her hands brushing their cold arms, feeling how dangerously thin they were. Lila's fingers trembled, but held the blanket closed. Minnie's teeth chattered once before she leaned into Lila's side. Ruger stayed pressed against their legs like a barrier made of muscle and instinct. A silent promise. Nia scanned the chamber and whispered, Harper. Look. Harper turned her flashlight to the wall. Carved into the stone were lines, hundreds of them. Some short, some long, some clustered in groups of 7, others in 3s, days, weeks, maybe years. Minnie pointed at the markings. He said every line was a day we survived. Lila carved them. She was better at counting. Lila looked away, ashamed for reasons Harper couldn't fathom. Harper's throat tightened. You kept yourself alive. That matters. For the first time, Lila's composure cracked. Her eyes glassed and she whispered, I didn't want Minnie to forget the sun. Harper swallowed hard. We're getting you out. Both of you. Ruger let out a sudden, sharp bark. Harper spun. Ruger was no longer watching the girls. His gaze was locked upward, toward a fissure in the ceiling where a thin line of air drifted. Nia lifted her flashlight. That's a vent. Eli stepped closer. That means there may be another tunnel above us. Harper felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. Nia's jaw clenched. If he used these tunnels to move the kids, he could be anywhere in this network. Ruger growled low. Not threat. Warning. Minnie whispered. He comes when the air changes. The air shifted. Cold swept the tunnel like a breath drawn from the stone itself. Harper stood up fast, heart pounding, scanning the shadows. Nia lifted her gun. Eli stiffened. Ruger's body pressed against the girls, shielding them, teeth bared. Harper whispered, He's here. The mountain answered with silence so deep it sounded like someone holding their breath. Then faint, almost inaudible. A single footstep echoed above them. Not far, not fleeing. Watching. The first footstep above them wasn't an echo. It was weight. Intentional. Controlled. Ruger's growl deepened, a low thunder rolling from his chest. Then a voice, disembodied in the stone, slid down through the vents. Step away from them. Harper's blood froze. Nia swung her flashlight upward, beam cutting across shadows that shifted with the drifting air. Eli raised his Glock, scanning every crack in the ceiling. Ruger planted himself directly in front of Lila and Minnie, shoulders squared, teeth bared. Another voice followed, rough and too calm. You're trespassing where you don't belong. Jonah Clive. Harper hadn't heard the name in years, Not since the investigation into Project Haven imploded. Security contractor, discharged for excessive force, vanished before the hearings. He wasn't dead. He was here. She whispered to the girls. Stay behind Ruger, don't move. Nia pointed her weapon at the ceiling. Jonah, step into the light. Jonah laughed, the sound scraping like gravel. You don't want that. A second later, stone shifted overhead. A spray of dust hit Harper's face. Then Jonah dropped through a widening crack in the ceiling, landing hard on the tunnel floor, knees bent, gun already raised. Ruger lunged. He hit Jonah before the man could fully level his weapon, teeth clamping onto his jacket sleeve. Jonah grunted, swung the gun sideways, firing a wild shot that ricocheted down the tunnel. Harper pulled Lila and Minnie against the wall, shielding them with her body. Nia shouted, Ruger, break! But Ruger didn't break. He dug in. Deeper! Jonah cursed, twisted, and slammed Ruger against the rock wall. Ruger yelped but didn't release his grip. Nia fired a warning shot. Jonah spun just as the bullet grazed his forearm. His gun clattered across the cave floor. He didn't go for it. He went for the girls. Harper saw his eyes flick toward them just a fraction of a second before he moved. She stepped in front of them, arms wide. Jonah reached for her shoulder. A gunshot cracked. He stumbled back. Eli stood behind Harper, both hands locked on his weapon, chest rising and falling in sharp bursts. He'd fired without permission, without protocol, without waiting for a clear command. He'd just shot to protect her. Jonah screamed, gripping his side. Nia lunged at him, but he dove into a side tunnel, scrambling away on hands and knees. Ruger tried to follow, but pain in his flank made him stagger. Harper caught him before he fell fully. Easy, boy, easy. Blood streaked Ruger's fur, a shallow slice across his ribs. He licked her hand once, refusing to leave her side despite the wound. Nia cursed, scanning the narrow escape tunnel. He knows this place better than we do. He'll double back. Eli reloaded, jaw clenched. No, he's heading for water. They always do. It erases tracks, and he knows we'll need the girls above ground. Harper lifted her flashlight toward the side tunnel Jonah used. It sloped downward, the air colder, the smell of moisture drifting through it. A river. Maybe a runoff stream. Jonah was trying to disappear. She whispered, Ruger, can you track? Ruger rose. Even injured, his stance sharpened. He sniffed the air, nose tilting toward the rushing echo deeper in the mountain. He barked once. Nia nodded. He's on it, let's move. They followed Ruger into the narrow passage, Eli covering the rear. The walls closed in quickly, forcing them to move in single file. Harper kept Lila and Minnie between her and Nia, Ruger leading the way. The tunnel emptied into a bowl-shaped cavern where a stream cut directly through the stone. Its flow was fast, icy, and loud. Ruger sniffed along the bank, then crossed, paws splashing through the shallow water. He paused on the opposite shore, head twisting left, then right. A faint shoe print pressed into the mud. Nia knelt beside it. That's adult. Heavy stride. He's hurt. Harper shivered from more than cold. Ruger lowered his head again, then trotted toward a slit in the stone wall, half hidden by ferns dripping with condensation. He barked. A sharp, certain sound. He went this way. Minnie clung to Harper's sleeve. Don't let him find us again. Harper knelt to meet her eyes. He won't. Ruger won't let him. Minnie looked at the dog, then nodded, small but brave. They followed Ruger through the slit. It opened onto a steep descent carved into the mountain's base. Snow drifted here from an unseen opening ahead. Outside, Jonah was fleeing for open ground. Ruger picked up speed, limping but relentless. Harper felt the old rush she'd known years ago on rescue missions, a mix of terror and clarity. The moment instinct overtook hesitation. Snowflakes burst into their flashlights as they emerged from the mountain onto a narrow ledge above the stream. Then a voice echoed from below. "You can't take them." Jonah stood in the creek, waist deep, gun held high above the rushing water. His coat was soaked, his breath ragged. Blood seeped through the fabric at his ribs. Nia shouted down, "You're surrounded! Drop the weapon!" Jonah laughed again, bitter and unhinged. Surrounded? By who? A dog and 3 people who don't understand what those girls are worth? Eli raised his weapon. Last warning. Jonah moved the gun toward Lila. Ruger launched off the ledge. Harper screamed. Ruger collided with Jonah midstream, knocking him sideways. The gun went off, bullet vanishing into the trees. Jonah fell hard, half submerged. Ruger clamped onto his arm, dragging him toward the bank with a strength that defied his injury. Harper slid down the slope, boots skidding, and charged into the stream. She grabbed Jonah's other arm while Ruger hauled the opposite side. Jonah thrashed wildly. Nia covered them from the ledge. Eli scrambled down behind Harper, grabbing Jonah's collar as they wrestled him onto the mud. The moment Jonah hit the bank, Ruger released him and backed up, panting, chest heaving, but ready for more. Jonah's breath rattled. Pink foam bubbling at his lips. His voice was a wet rasp, barely audible over the stream. "Not supposed to be found," he wheezed, clutching his side. "You don't know what you've opened." Eli knelt beside him, gun trained. "Maybe so, but they're going home." Jonah glared, blood pooling beneath him, his strength fading fast. "Protocol," he choked out. "You should have let it lie." By dawn, the mountain felt different, lighter almost, like the night had peeled something rotten off its bones. Jonah Clive lay cuffed inside the emergency response trailer, flanked by 2 federal agents. His face was ashen. His eyes kept drifting toward Ruger, who sat 10 yards away, posture tall and unblinking, as if guarding the girls even through walls. Harper watched the exchange, and for a moment Jonah looked afraid. Truly afraid. The agents lifted him into a transport van. Jonah finally spoke, his voice thin. "You think this ends with me?" Eli shut the door without answering. The engine rumbled, and the van crawled down the slick mountain road, disappearing into the white blur of morning frost. Nia let out a breath she'd been holding since Alaska. Not bad for one night's work. Harper scanned the ridge, the cave entrance now swarming with crime scene markers. She didn't feel victorious. She felt hollow, like her mind hadn't fully caught up to the fact that 2 girls were alive, breathing, clinging to the sleeves of her flannel jacket. Lila leaned into her side, eyes swollen but alert. Minnie sat cross-legged, in the grass, both hands buried in Ruger's fur. The dog stayed perfectly still, letting her cling to him like he'd been waiting 4 years to do exactly that. Harper sat beside them. "How are you holding up?" Lila shrugged. Her voice came out rough. "They said you wouldn't come. They said no one would." Harper swallowed. "Someone lied to you, sweetheart. Someone counted on you believing that." Ruger nosed at her knee, sensing the shift in her tone. Harper's hand drifted to his head automatically, grounding herself in the familiar warmth. She whispered so only he could hear. "You knew. From the beginning, you knew." The FBI's mobile command post buzzed behind them with quiet fury. Paper files, encrypted drives, sealed boxes that had sat dormant for years were now being yanked into daylight. Project Haven, once buried under budget cuts and redacted memos, had been cracked open like a rusted vault. Eli approached from the command post, a clipboard under his arm, fatigue lining every inch of his posture. He paused when he reached Harper. "You should sit. You've been running on fumes." Harper eyed him. "So have you." He gave a faint, tired smile. "The Bureau's bringing in a full task force. There were more victims on the books. Kids placed off registry. Funds moved through front companies. Clive wasn't acting alone. Harper's jaw tightened. Someone else on the mountain. Maybe not now, but at some point? Yes, and someone high up made sure the records disappeared. Nia joined them, arms folded. So the program wasn't shut down. It just went underground. Eli nodded. And we're going to dig every inch of it up. Harper glanced at the girls. They were whispering to Ruger now, telling him tiny, fractured pieces of their story. His ears twitched, soft, patient. He didn't move away. Harper looked back at Eli. What happens to them? Until we sort out guardianship and social services evaluations, they'll need a temporary caregiver, someone stable, someone they trust. Before she could respond, Minnie's hand clamped onto her sleeve. She shook her head fiercely, eyes wide. Not leaving. Lila nodded, voice trembling. We're not going anywhere without Ruger. Harper's chest tightened. She brushed Minnie's hair out of her eyes. You want to stay with me? Minnie nodded again. Eli exhaled, relieved. Well, that answers that. You good taking them in for a while? Harper opened her mouth, but the answer rose before she could think. Yes, it felt strange, not like a choice, like something falling into place. Nia arched a brow. You sure? This mountain life of yours is quiet. Kids will change that fast. Harper looked at Lila and Minnie, both watching her closely. Ruger, too, kept his eyes trained on her, as if waiting for her to say what he already knew. Quiet's overrated. Harper murmured. Besides, Ruger already made the decision. The dog's tail thumped once. Nia snorted. Guess that's that. Later, back at Harper's cabin, the mountain air settled around, them like a blanket. The forest still hummed with late winter wind, but the silence wasn't sharp anymore. It was gentle, lived in. Harper pushed the door open. It wasn't much. A wood stove, a sofa with patched plaid cushions, shelves stacked with dog medicine and old field journals. But Lila stepped inside like she was entering a cathedral. It smells safe, she whispered. Harper blinked hard. You're welcome here, for as long as you need. Ruger trotted in, inspected the room, then circled back to the girls, sitting between them like a sentry. Minnie hugged him so tightly it almost toppled her. He leaned into the pressure without breaking posture. Harper warmed leftover stew on the stove. The girls ate slowly, cautiously, as if the food might vanish. Harper didn't push. Trauma didn't unwind on demand. It softened with repetition, with warmth, with proof. Nia stepped beside her, voice low. You're doing the right thing. Harper stared into the pot. I'm terrified. Good. Means you care. By nightfall, the girls had curled up under an old quilt on the couch. Ruger lay in front of them, chin on his paws, eyes half closed, but very much awake. Harper stood on the porch alone, wind brushing her hair back. She looked at the outline of pine against the moon. 4 years ago, she'd run here to drown silence. Now she wasn't alone in it. She walked back in. Ruger lifted his head, watching her. Harper knelt and rested her forehead against his. You saved them. You saved me, too. His breath warmed her cheek. His eyes closed. For the first time since her son died, Harper felt something slip into the empty space that grief had carved in her chest. Not a replacement, a beginning. And outside, the Sawtooth Mountains seemed to breathe with her, as if acknowledging that justice had only just begun, and that healing, slow and quiet, was already at the cabin door. The camera crew arrived just after sunrise, their tires crunching over the early spring gravel. The Sawtooth Mountains stood behind them, washed in thin gold light, quiet in that way only places that have survived tragedy can be. Harper stepped out onto the porch with 2 mugs of coffee, one for herself, one for the reporter who looked like he hadn't slept since Boise. Ruger followed her, moving slower than he used to, but with the same steady purpose. His muzzle had frosted with grey in the past year. His gait carried a hint of stiffness from the injury he never truly let anyone fuss over. But when he saw the girls step out behind Harper, Lila taller now, Minnie holding 2 backpacks ready for school, his tail thumped the porch rail like he was still a 2-year-old Dutch shepherd with a job to do. The reporter smiled awkwardly as he unfolded his notes. "Thank you for meeting us, Miss Caldwell. Folks around here have been talking about your story all year." Harper offered him the mug. "Just Harper is fine." The cameraman lifted his rig onto his shoulder. "We'll start with a soft opener. Something. Human interest. Idaho likes human interest." Harper chuckled softly. "If you say so." The girls sat on the porch steps with Ruger between them. Minnie braided a small section of his fur absent-mindedly. He tolerated it with a sigh. The reporter cleared his throat. "Harper, can we ask the question viewers wrote in the most? The one everyone keeps repeating?" Harper nodded. He leaned forward. "1 year ago you walked behind your cabin and stood in front of that limestone slab, and everything changed. How did you know something was hidden behind that rock on that exact morning?" Harper looked down at Ruger. He lifted his head, eyes bright amber, still sharp as the moment he first tore through the mist 4 seasons ago. She rested her hand on his crown. "I didn't know." The reporter blinked. "You didn't?" Harper shook her head slowly, gently rubbing Ruger's ear the way he liked. But he did. He heard something no human heard. He felt a truth the rest of us had ignored for 4 years. The camera zoomed in on Ruger. Age softened his features, but nothing could dull the focus in his eyes. Not time, not injury, not the weight of what he'd carried across seasons and storms. Harper continued. "I walked past that ridge 100 times. I told myself it was just rock, just weather, just another quiet morning." She paused, breath catching the memory. Ruger never believed that. The reporter shifted, the gravity of the moment settling around the porch. Harper looked past the camera then, as if seeing the entire year stitched together. The trials, the depositions, the federal reports, the nights Lila woke up screaming and Ruger pressed his body against her until she slept again. Minnie learning to laugh in the kitchen while baking bread that burned half the time. Nia calling every week with updates. Eli sending a Christmas card even though he claimed to hate holidays. Harper inhaled deeply. Ruger didn't find evidence. He found people. 2 kids everyone thought were lost forever. The cameraman swallowed hard. He lowered the lens for a moment, pretending to adjust focus. Lila leaned her head against Ruger's shoulder. Minnie wrapped an arm around his chest. He tolerated the affection the way only a war-seasoned dog could. Stoic on the surface, soft as river moss underneath. The reporter regained his voice. "What do you think Ruger knew that morning, before you did?" Harper smiled, small and steady. "Pain leaves an echo in the world. Some of us learn to ignore it so we can keep going. Dogs don't. They hear the quiet things, the forgotten things, the ones people give up on." Her voice dropped to a whisper, but the mic picked up every word. That day he wasn't barking at danger. He was barking for the truth. The mountain wind moved through the pines like a breath finally released. The camera caught the way Ruger lifted his head towards the tree line, ears pricked, still listening to the world the way only he could. The reporter closed his notebook. "Last question. Harper, if you could say one thing to viewers about what happened here, about everything Ruger taught you, what would it be?" Harper looked straight into the lens, shoulders squared, voice steady. "What's your story with a loyal pet?" She let the silence settle. Let it breathe. Let it find its own weight. Then she added, warm as a hearth fire. And if stories like Ruger's mean something to you, support the channels that honor dogs like him, especially our German Shepherd families out there. Every share, every comment, every voice helps us keep telling their stories, helps us keep listening for the ones who still need to be found. Ruger nudged her hand. Harper smiled, eyes soft. And trust me, sometimes one bark can change everything. Fade out, end of story.